Admittedly, the vast majority of people who believe that Jesus was resurrected from the dead do so because of church dogma or perhaps some kind of a religious optimism, which they call faith. But are there actually rational and empirical reasons for believing that the resurrection actually took place? I'm Michael, the Bible ReThinker. It's time to rethink. Now, when we come to the subject of Jesus, the historical Jesus, one thing that is never denied among scholars is that Jesus did, in fact, exist. We don't need the Bible to know that he existed in history. He's in other places like Josephus and Tacitus, other secular, non-Christian documents that are from the first couple of centuries. He's there. There's no denying that. The question is, though, why on earth did Christians have the audacity to think that Jesus was resurrected from the dead? Now, some of you will say right from the start, oh, that's absolutely impossible. That never happens. It could not possibly have happened in history. And while I'll agree with you that it is quite improbable, I'm not sure that we should consider it impossible. I mean, if we're to believe that there is a God, some kind of higher power that has something to do with perhaps the origin of the world, even if we don't adopt specifically what the Bible says about it, if there is a higher power, then doesn't it mean it's possible, however improbable, that somebody in real history might have been resurrected from the dead? Now, if we regard this as a possibility, however slim, let's think about where this idea of Jesus resurrecting came from in the first place. Jesus was a messianic first century Jewish leader. And in that respect, he was quite ununique. He wasn't unique at all. There were lots of messianic movements that are recorded from this time period, and the pattern was always the same. There's a person who rises up declaring that they're going to be the Messiah, the liberator of the Jewish people from the oppressive Romans. And they would gather up around themselves many different followers. And the plan was that they would eventually rebel against Rome violently. But the same pattern happened over and over and over and over again. Eventually, the Messiah, perhaps a couple of his disciples as well, would get caught, they'd be put on trial, and they would be executed. They would be crucified by Rome. And then after the so-called Messiah and perhaps a couple of his followers were killed, the movement would die out. It would dissipate. It would stop because, well, people don't seem to want to, be killed for believing a Messiah who was apparently a failed Messiah because he was crucified. He did not liberate the people. Jesus was much like these other messianic figures. He had a gathering around himself of disciples who were listening to his teaching. But Jesus, just like all the other messiahs, eventually Rome caught up with him, and Rome had him crucified because he was a so-called Messiah. But something very strange happened after the crucifixion of Jesus. And that is that his followers begin to go around proclaiming that Jesus was actually resurrected from the dead. Now, that's very strange because normally the pattern during this time period is after a Messiah loses his life, the whole thing fades away. But after Jesus lost his life, His disciples go around the world. And this message that Jesus was resurrected from the dead spread all over the place, all over the world, and it has grown to become a massive world religion. But at its origin, why on earth did the disciples say that Jesus was resurrected from the dead? Now, perhaps one of the first conclusions you would jump to is it's kind of a fish story. That the early disciples talked about Jesus being crucified, said his teaching is great, and eventually, like a fishtail, as the message began to spread throughout the world, the story got bigger. After all, people wanted to follow an important, great big religious figure. And so the story grew to where Jesus was resurrected from the dead. But there's a major problem with that conclusion, and that is this: that the idea of resurrection, or even the desire for resurrection, was strictly a Jewish idea. I know there's a manifestation of it in Zoroastrianism, but outside of that, which is not where the gospel initially goes to anyways, it goes into the Roman world. As this message about Jesus spreads into the ancient Roman world, it interacted with more and more Greek philosophy, more of a Greek audience. And so as we get into the 2nd and 3rd century, we find little bits of Greek influence in Christianity. And a very fundamental idea in Greek philosophy is that resurrection was an awful thing. The Greeks didn't want to be resurrected. They wanted to die and then have their soul go to a different place. But resurrection, very specifically, is not dying and your soul going somewhere else, but dying and then your body itself being resuscitated, being made alive again. And the claim of Christianity is that Jesus was alive again, that he walked around like you and me. So it's extremely improbable that as the message about Jesus moved into a Greek world, that the Greeks would then add to it an idea that was anathema to the Greek world. The Greeks hated the idea of resurrection. And so it only makes sense for resurrection to be part of the Jewish story. And when was Christianity primarily Jewish? Well, that's at the very, very beginning. Remember, the original disciples around Jesus were exclusively Jewish. And so the origin of the idea of Jesus being resurrected is quite ancient, and it's included in all 4 of the canonical Gospels, which are 4 separate ancient documents that date from the 1st century, and they consistently assert that Jesus was resurrected from the dead. And then the disciples proclaim that into all the world. Why on earth would they make such a claim? Why would the outcome of this Messiah's death be so different than the outcome of other Messiah's death? And furthermore, why would the disciples claim that Jesus was resurrected when it carried such risk for themselves? The Jews who were followers of Jesus were persecuted by the Jews who were not followers of Jesus from very early on. So this proclamation wasn't safe. This proclamation invited persecution and suffering. So if they were making up a lie, you would think that the lie would come undone when the lie involved so much suffering. But they persisted in their testimony, even though of the original 12 disciples, 10 of them faced martyrdom because of what they proclaimed. Why would they stick to such an outlandish story except that they actually believed that it was really true? So as a historian, here's what we have to do. We have to say, okay, we know Jesus existed. We know Jesus was crucified. And we know that eventually following Jesus proliferated all throughout the ancient Roman Empire. And we have to figure out what happened between the crucifixion and the proliferation of this idea that caused it to spread. So you've got to come up with some historical reason to get from here to here. I would suggest to you that the most logical conclusion is that however improbable it is, it's slightly possible and most rational that what happened is that Jesus was actually truly resurrected from the dead. Without that missing piece, historical reconstructions simply don't make any sense. What do you think? I would love to hear your comments. What holes do you see in my logic? I would love to hear that too. What do you have to say? And please hit the subscribe button and visit my website, thebiblerethinker.org, for exclusive videos and to donate to this channel.